So it's a special treat for me today to introduce Sam Zell to you. As many of you know, my area of academic interest is real estate, and Sam is the most successful real estate entrepreneur of our age. So it really is something we can learn a lot from him, and it's really a thrill when I first got to meet him. Sam was born in Chicago to parents who immigrated from Poland just before the German invasion. He went to the University of Michigan, where he received his law degree in 1966. While at Michigan, Sam began to assemble real estate. He practiced law, I think, for about a week.
4 days.
4 days, okay, so not even a week, before deciding that becoming an entrepreneur was his passion. And Sam is renowned for, as all of you know, in value investing, buying up distressed properties at low prices and selling them at the height of the market. His most legendary transaction was the sale of equity office properties to Blackstone for $39 billion in 2007. Understand the year, 2007, just before everything fell apart. And if you read anything about him, you know his moniker is the grave dancer. As he put it himself, quote, "I was dancing on the skeletons of other people's mistakes." Today, Sam is the chairman of 5 public companies. I won't mention all of them. He's also the chairman of the Tribune company, which owns the LA Times, the Chicago Tribune, and several other newspapers and television stations. Now, what shows that Sam has tremendous good judgment is not the fact that you sold for $39 billion, but that you have the good judgment to surround yourself with University of Chicago alumni. These include...
It's an eleemosynary effort.
So these include Bill Pate, class of '93, co-president of Equity Group Investments. David Helfand, the new co-president with Bill, who is MBA class of '90, but also married to our graduate Leslie Bloom, class of '89. Ellen Kelleher, class of '85, executive vice president of Equity Lifestyles. And of course, Don Liebentritt, 76, your longtime attorney and the chief restructuring office for the Tribune. So we expect actually a commission for all these people at the end of the day. Sam is also one of the nation's leading philanthropists. He's endowed research centers at the University of Michigan, Northwestern, the University of Pennsylvania, as well as a new entrepreneurialism program at the University of Michigan Law School. He's also a man who has little appetite for beating around the bush, as I'm sure you'll hear today. So it's an enormous pleasure for me to introduce Sam. And let me just tell you what the format is going to be. First, please, no one should record the event today. I'm going to spend the first half, or a little more than half, asking a set of questions, and we'll have a discussion. And then what we'll do is we'll open it up for questions sometime after 1 o'clock. So with that, I thought we would start by talking a little bit about the current real estate market. So can you give us a sense of where we have all this, in this audience, there's budding entrepreneurs who are just waiting to get out of law school to start buying up real estate. Is this the right time to do that?
Well, I think, first of all, you have to make a distinction between single-family real estate and commercial real estate. Single-family market is beginning to show some signs of life. In my opinion, those signs are materially less than green shoots. There's about 4 million houses in the United States today that are in kind of purgatory, meaning they're not foreclosed, they're not current, and they're a mess. I'm not as optimistic about the opportunities in the single-family business. Just about everybody I read about is starting up single-family scavenger operations and grave dancer operations.
There was something in the paper today about
today,
it.
yeah. But when it's all said and done, nobody has been able to solve what I think is the core issue, and that is, from an operational point of view, if you bought 1,000 houses, how do you operate them? How do you rent them? I'm the chairman of the board of Equity Residential. I think we're the largest apartment REIT in the country. On average, we have 400 houses per site. So from an operational point of view, we control our environment. In the single-family business, not only is the location disparate, but the reality is you don't want to own too many houses on the same street. So in fact, you want just the opposite. So I think that there's an operational issue that nobody has confronted. I mean, there's little doubt that anybody in this room could go out and buy 25 or 50 houses and run them and probably do fine with them. But that's not a business. That's an entrepreneurial effort and maybe totally justified for somebody. But in terms of a business, in terms of operating at scale, I don't see it. I think I think it's unfortunate that the government did not allow the market to clear. Had I, as I believed at the time, if the single-family market had been allowed to clear, we would not have the circumstances we have today.
What do you mean by not being allowed to clear? My understanding of everything that the Obama administration has tried to do in terms of mortgage modification has been that it's been a failure. And
yes.
So they haven't stopped properties from going into foreclosure or from being foreclosed.
The best analogy I can give you is it's about that kid in Holland who stuck his finger in the dike.
Right.
Okay? And I was, the bottom line is that the government immediately started screaming, we got to stop foreclosures, we got to stop this, we got to stop that. So everything froze, okay? The banks were afraid, the people are robo-signing. I mean, all of this crap is all the result of just interfering with the market. And if you wouldn't interfere with the market, you'd have a very different circumstance today. As far as, commercial real estate is
well, let me interrupt you there because let me follow up on what you just said. So you don't perceive that there was that there could be a problem with too many houses coming on the market too fast, thereby creating contagion in the neighborhoods and other properties being badly maintained.
And how about if we go out and rearrange the stars and see if we can get them to realign? And maybe we'll get meteors not to come by. What else? We could sing Kumbaya together, too. I mean,
So you just don't think we can do it?
Isn't it obvious? I mean, talk to me about the success of what's been accomplished so far.
Right.
I mean, it just, we live in a capitalistic environment, and every time the government interferes with that environment, it exponentially accelerates the problem.
So right now, where we are is lots of properties sort of in this land of purgatory. Would you just say government should just say we're no longer going to try to even modify mortgages or try to work out, take an active role?
I just don't think that's the government's role, and
Okay.
for sure it's not anything the government is good at. And I just think that every time the government tries to do something like that, it only makes it worse, and I for sure think that's the case now. I mean, had the government stayed out of it, we would have had a lot of foreclosures, we had a lot of people losing their homes, about the same amount they'd have lost it anyway, except we have a market, we have a clearing, and we could go on. That's really the problem, and I think we got at least 2 or 3 more years on the single-family side. On the commercial real estate side, it's a similar but different kind of situation. There's unlimited amount of capital available to buy high-quality assets. The number of available high-quality assets is probably as small as at any time, certainly in my career. Primarily because a very significant portion of commercial real estate is over-leveraged. And in '07 or '08 or '09, they pretended and extended, and they pushed the debt forward. And the assumption was, like the government, and assuming, 6 months from now, the unemployment rate is going to be 6 or whatever, they came up with a whole bunch of assumptions as to how rates were going to go up, and da-da-da. And the bottom line is occupancy has gone up, rates have not. And so literally a very significant portion of the commercial real estate market is underwater. You have zombie owners, kind of like owners in the single family world.
Right.
The zombie owner sits there and says, I own this office building. Nobody's taking it away from me. I may not have no cash flow, but I got a hope certificate. I got an option. So the zombie owner says, if I want to sell the property, there's nobody I can sell it to. So therefore, I might as well sit here and who knows, I may get lucky.
And this differs from, you bought up properties after the savings and loan crisis.
I bought properties in '74, '5, and '6, in early '80s, and very heavily in the early '90s.
Right.
But at that time, it was very simple. If I went to the bank and I agreed to buy an office building from them, the next thing they said was, how about another 3?
Right.
Okay? Today, but then the cost of capital for the banks was 7%. Today, the cost of capital for banks is 0.5%. Therefore, the banks have no incentive to do anything other than slowly feed out real estate. When it's all said and done, though, you've got to solve the over-leveraged situation. And ultimately, that means people have to take losses. That means that, dilution is probably the solution. But net, we're not going to have a vibrant real estate market until we're able to address and deal with the over-leveraged situation.
Okay, so so your view on the residential side is that the hangover is largely government regulation caused or government caused with respect to
No. The hangover on the single-family side is that we all acted irresponsibly for a long time.
Right.
And it came, and fruition came.
Right, but when the party ended,
Yeah,
the government extended the problem.
that's correct. Instead of allowing the problem
Right.
to solve itself, the government just extended it.
So now on the commercial side, is government involved as part of the problem, or is it
No.
is it more on the interest rate
This is
side?
all the banking system, the securitization system, but it's not government related.
So how do you get to an end? How do you get to a bottom in the commercial
I
market?
think the answer is that interest rates are going to go up.
Right.
As interest rates go up, the cost of carry of difficult real estate will go up significantly, and in effect, the system will force the properties out at whatever the market will pay.
And then will you be there waiting to get them?
Depends, maybe. I mean, the answer is, I'm for sure a professional opportunist. I'm for sure been always focused on identifying value and opportunities. I'm not very active in the real estate market today, primarily because I don't really see much opportunity. The other day Blackstone raised $12 billion for their next opportunity fund. I just like to know what the opportunity is. Maybe they'd let me know.
Right.
I just don't, that doesn't make sense to me. I think there's much better opportunity today in the non-real estate world.
So let me talk to you a little bit about opportunity, and in the United States today, do we have a society that will create future Sam Zells? People who don't have a lot to begin with and are able to get great educations. You got a great public education at the University of Michigan, and went on, probably your tuition was almost next to nothing.
I also had a very good Chicago public school system
Right.
education and a Highland Park High School education.
So do we have an opportunity, do we have those same opportunities today? And ultimately, if we don't, what can we do about that?
I think that, number one, I probably speak at college campuses, 15 or 20 times a year. I would say to you that every single time, without exception, usually at the end, some guy in the back raises his hand and says, "It's really interesting how well you've done. But look at me, I'm confronted with a very different world, and I won't have anywhere near the opportunities you had." And you know what? If you go back 40 years, there was some guy in the back of the room who asked that question. If you go back 60 years, there's some guy in the back of the room. The world always looks nigh on impossible from the perspective of a desk. But once you get out into the world, and if you have what I would call the entrepreneurial characteristics, I just think that this country still provides a very unique opportunity. Now, having said that, certainly the direction of the last 4 years suggests the opposite. And it's very clear. I mean, just the Dodd-Frank bill alone is extraordinarily burdensome to any kind of entrepreneurial activities. Supposedly, the president is about to sign the jobs bill, which effectively modifies the terms of Sarbanes-Oxley. Well, Sarbanes-Oxley was an absolute disaster. It still is. And has accomplished
In what
nothing.
respects?
Well, I mean, this was supposed to be the end of fraud, okay? We're going to legislate morality, okay? Come on, we just came through the biggest fraud in history in the mortgage market. How come Sarbanes-Oxley didn't protect us? A lot of public companies, a lot of companies involved, a lot of companies subject to Sarbanes-Oxley, but they were crooks. And if you're a crook, you can write the best legislation in the world, and you can either ignore it or get around it. So I guess all I would say is that the society we live in is a very unique society. If you ask me to compare this society with almost every other in the world, I would say that the entrepreneurial opportunity in the United States is unmatched.
How is, you said Dodd-Frank is the all evil with respect to entrepreneurialism. How is it how is it tamping down entrepreneurialism?
There's registration provisions upon registration agreements. I mean, there's one provision in there that says if I gave a political contribution 3 years ago to some state employee running for office, and I got the state university's pension fund to invest with me next year, it would be a look back and therefore make it illegal. I mean, I didn't know then, I don't know. It doesn't make any sense. But it's like a lot of, it's a 2,300 page bill. What could possibly make sense about a 2,300 page bill? Who would know? I mean, is anybody who read it? Has anybody read Obamacare? I don't think so.
Well, I haven't.
That's called legislative obfuscation.
Right. So does it trouble you? One of the things that we have seen is growing inequality, and people have talked a lot about that, have said that it affects both people's behavior, it affects the way the economy works. Does it trouble you at all that compared to, say, 10, 15 years ago, we're seeing an increase in inequality? Does it, and I'll ask a multiple question, does it bother you in Warren Buffett's expression that his secretary pays more in taxes as a percent of her income than he does?
Well, let's just take it one step at a time, okay? The whole game of percentages doesn't mean a thing. That's kind of preposterous, and that's a political statement, not a fact statement. Warren Buffett pays $20 million, or who knows what, in taxes. I pay $50 million in taxes. Second of all, as far as inequality is concerned, I would only suggest to everybody to find me where in the world the equality does exist that everybody is so worried about losing. Latin America, Russia, Europe, England, where? Saudi Arabia? Where is this equality exist? It doesn't. And it doesn't because we're all part of a selective process. There's 300 people in this room. Your average IQ is 140 or 30 or whatever it takes to get into the University of Chicago. Is it fair that your opportunities should be limited for the sake of an egalitarian society? Who's going to volunteer? I'm looking for a hand. Where are the volunteers? You voted for Obama, right?
Well, let me suggest.
Yeah, let's sing Kumbaya, okay? The answer is sure. The answer is that history says that if you create a society with a maximum level of opportunity, you will have the highest number of happy people. Whether that's quote unquote equal or not is irrelevant. As long as everybody thinks they got a chance, as long as there's an opportunity for everybody to excel, as well as an opportunity to make a choice. There are people who make a choice to be in the eleemosynary world. There are people who make a choice to be an academic. And they are making a definitive economic lifestyle choice. And I respect them. And everybody should be allowed to do that. But the idea of society coming up with something called fair or equal, is there anybody in this room who's identical to anybody else?
Okay, so throwing the word equal out, which I'm guilty of since I started it by saying inequality, I don't think anyone is suggesting, even the president, that we should be equal in terms of income distribution.
We should just get equal rewards for disparate effort.
No, I don't think that's the case
Then
either.
maybe.
But what I do think
I could talk slower.
But what I do think is that people feel that there should be a more robust safety net out there, and that it's
50% of the people don't pay taxes already. How much safety net do you want?
But if you look at, so you don't think that public services such as schools have anything to do with tax revenue?
Yeah, I do. And in 1962 was the year the NEA was formed. Mm-hmm. From 1962 on, public school performance has gone only one direction, down. In the same period of time, the subsidy per pupil has gone nothing but up. Something's wrong. Something's very wrong.
So what do you think is wrong with our system of
I think we've lost our priorities. I think that Albert Shanker said it beautifully. He was the president of the New York Teachers Union. He said, when the students start paying our dues, we'll start representing the students. Very simple. Okay? If that's the attitude, then we can't educate the population.
So it's all the unions?
And by the way, there is nothing more racist than what's happening on our educational front. Nothing. Everything else, Traylon, whatever his name is, all these, that's nothing compared to how horrible what we are doing to our underclass by not educating them. And whether it be the unions, the political, I'm agnostic as to who I have to blame, other than we've allowed our system to get hijacked. And this country is going to pay a huge price for that.
All right, well, how do you see us getting out of that problem? Because I think most of us agree that our system of public education is in many instances failing, and maybe some of the blame has to do with public unions, maybe a lot of the blame, but certainly not all the blame. And certainly that's not, just changing the unions isn't going to change the system.
I'm sorry, you're focusing on my NEA comment, but that's only a small part of an overall scenario where we have basically ignored education. We've thought that the answer is just throw money at it. And there's been plenty of people who've been willing to take the money but not perform. And so whether it be a longer school day or pay per performance, or, there is no justification that a school system should be run any different than any other organization. And there should be responsibility, there should be accountability, and none of that exists today. You know how long it takes to fire a teacher in Chicago? How long does it take to fire a teacher at the University of Chicago?
I've not had to do that. Thank goodness. Not somewhere I want to go.
Really?
And everybody here is better than average, so there's not a problem. Let me switch from one problem without a solution to what seems to be another problem. How do you view the budget deficit fiasco of last year in terms of, do you see a solution in the near future, in the even distant future?
I don't think there's a problem with seeing the solution. Erskine Bowles basically outlined the solution.
But there were tax increases in that.
I didn't say I was an ideologue. You did.
Okay, I didn't say.
You know, I mean, the answer is that there's a lot of adjustments that have to be made. But just think about, you know, I know you're lawyers, but I think you can count. The average duration of the U.S. debt today is just short of 3 years. The average interest rate on the U.S. debt is currently just below 2%. The average interest rate of government borrowing over the last 20 years has been 5.6. If you took today's debt level and applied 5.6 to it, you would have no Medicare, you would have no nothing other than paying interest on the debt. So I guess if you ask me, do I think that's a problem? Yeah, I think that's a big problem. And do I think it must be resolved? Yes, it must be resolved. Is it going to be resolved by a State of the Union speech that calls for significantly more spending and no reductions? I don't think so. I don't think so. And I think the biggest single risk is the day where somebody says, I don't want to buy U.S. debt. Right now, the Federal Reserve is buying 40% of the debt that the country is selling. So that means there's 40% of the debt we're selling. There are no buyers. So the buyer of last resort is buying it. What happens when it gets to be 60% or 70%? And then game over. And if the U.S. dollar is no longer the reserve currency, I think it translates probably into a 25% reduction in the standard of living in this country.
So you would have supported Erskine Bowles, or in other words, there was at one point over last summer the great deal that could have been made between the Republicans and the Democrats.
Yeah, not a problem.
And were you lobbying in favor of that or expressing your views?
I didn't think there was anything to lobby about, okay? Erskine Bowles was thrown in the wastebasket as soon as it was finished printing. And the great deal, nobody ever laid out what it was.
Mm-hmm. Although what was suggested in the media was that the House of Representatives backed out on the great deal.
Do you really believe everything you read in the media?
It's, you know,
I mean, I know a little bit about this.
I understand that, and you know, I wasn't going to go there.
Shame on you.
I wasn't going to go there,
goodness.
but you know, you opened the door, so to speak. So let's talk about your media investments. So, you know, obviously, you are the owner of the Chicago Tribune. That has led to some level of controversy in your life, and some level of perhaps aggravation. Would you say today, knowing what you know today about what happened, would you have done anything differently, and what would that have been?
In the most simplistic terms, we looked at the performance of the Tribune for the 7 years prior to the time we bought it. During that 7 years, average revenue declined 3% a year. When we underwrote the deal, we underwrote it at 6% decline each year going forward. And at the end of the first quarter of our ownership, revenue was down 30%. You know, I may be a magician, a grave dancer, whatever you want. In a leveraged business, an operating leveraged business, 30% is terminus. And that's what happened. And, you know, would I do it again? Absolutely. Because the risk reward of the transaction was extraordinary both ways. And unfortunately, it turned out to be binary.
Where's it going to end up?
I don't know. I think it starts with the fact that, you know, that we're probably currently finding the number of newspapers, printed newspapers, that we can find customers who are willing to pay for it. I think we're getting near finding that core number. We're actually seeing subscriptions start to increase a little bit. So after a dramatic fall in circulation, you're seeing an uptick. All of the newspapers now have paywalls. Obviously, you can't run a business where you pay for the production of the content and give it away for free. It should have been done, you know, 5 years ago by all the newspapers. But ownership of newspapers in this country is not exactly genius group either, like academics,
right,
etc. But I think that there's always going to be a role for a newspaper. I think it's pretty limited going forward. And maybe in another generation, there won't be any newspaper readers. I mean, you know, how many people in this room start every day reading the newspaper? That's a pretty serious indictment.
So what happens to investigative journalism at the local level?
Well, I mean, the answer is you can't pay for it unless there's a revenue source.
Right.
And at least so far, even the Wall Street Journal's paywall doesn't produce any significant amount of revenue. So either you're going to lose investigative journalism or you're going to turn to literally pay for the content. And that might be interesting because then you might see Huffington Post competing with the LA Times, which they do already, but even more so in that kind of a paywall environment.
Although you do end up with this standard public goods problem, right? That basically it benefits everyone to have corruption at the local level or state level be outed, but it's not worth it to anybody to pay for it.
Well, if it's not worth it for anybody to pay for it, then by definition it ain't going to happen.
Right.
Even though that may be, you know, not good for us.
All right, I have one more question before I open it up to the audience, and that is I want to reflect for a moment on your legal training. Okay.
I thought you were going to say career.
No, your career was a short one, but I'm sure it's filled you with lots of opinions. But what I want to know is, tell me, did you gain anything from having gone to law school that you can apply in your day-to-day life as an entrepreneur? What were the most important skills, assuming you just nodded your head, so yeah. I figure I'm going to get some positive response. What were those elements?
What I would say is no day has ever gone by, including this morning, when I have not been involved in using my legal thinking to be relevant to what I do every day. And when kids ask me, should I go to law school, should I get an MBA? My answer to all of them is always go to law school. Because what it does is it teaches you how to think. I graduated from law school. I built a huge business while I was in Ann Arbor, which I love doing. I unfortunately put the business on my resume when I went to get a job. I got 43 out of 44 rejections, which, by the way, is a critical ingredient if you ever want to be an entrepreneur. You really have to learn to deal with rejection. But the bottom line is I did get a job. I did work for this firm. They gave me a contract between a linen supply company and a dormitory at Northern Illinois University that I was supposed to draft. And I promise you that I knew as much then as you know today, and are likely to know tomorrow. I didn't know anything, so I got a horn book, and I got this guy next door to help me, and it was horrible. And then on Friday morning, I did something only a 24-year-old can do. I went into the senior partner and I said, I didn't think this was a good use of my time. And he looked at me and he said, what? And I said, I don't think this is a good use of my time. He said, what are you going to do? I said, I'm just going to go back to doing deals. He said, well, why don't you stay here and we'll do the legal work and we'll invest in your deals. And that's what we did for a year. And then after you can't be an entrepreneur in a legal meritocracy without causing havoc, which is what I did. So I went out.
Really?
Opened, yeah, really.
Can't imagine. Okay, so now let's open it up. Anybody have questions? Yes.
Just on the topic of education. So UChicago and I guess University of Michigan would both be regarded as among the elite law schools. And that label, I'm just wondering, a lot of employers and law firms would see that or see the school rather than what you did there as a good proxy for what's going to make a successful lawyer or a successful business person. In your experience, do you think, first of all, that proxy has value, and what do you look for if someone's in front of you and you're thinking about hiring them beyond where they went to school or how they did there, and even what are the broader characteristics that you see as making successful business people and lawyers?
When I was a student, I was told that it was extraordinarily important where I went to school in order to get a job. And that, of course, led me to apply to good schools. The real truth, this is Sam's guess, but if I were guessing, I would say that the reason these schools have the kinds of reputations they have is because they attract students with much higher IQ or capabilities than other schools. So it's kind of and then they in turn benefit from that, create an academic environment that's superior, and one feeds off the other. But I think it's much more than just what the university offers. It's the combination of what the university offers and the quality of the student body it attracts.
Right, but let me follow up on this question. So what you're saying is essentially we are a good screen, we are a good label, you know what you're getting because we attract very smart students, so smart is smart.
But I can't
imagine,
I can't imagine having two candidates in front of me and making a decision based on where you went to school.
Okay.
Can't even imagine that. Yes? Yes.
Mr. Zell, you've been around the movers and shakers of our world, in our country and abroad. What guiding principles of life would you impose on these law students and their learned professors concerning the hopes and challenges of our brave new world post 9/11?
That's a pretty broad question, sir. I think that, more than anything else, I think everybody needs to be true to themselves, needs to both understand who they are and what that means. I'm not sure I think 9/11 fits into it other than it certainly was a shock for all of us. But, when it's all said and done, you can start with the 11th commandment and say, thou shalt not take oneself seriously. And in the same manner, you can go out there and make sure that you understand that your responsibility is to maximize and test your limits. That's what's driven me all my life. All my life, I've always wanted to test my limits, see how good I was. And I'm 70 years old and it hasn't changed. Yes?
Sir, you are investing heavily abroad.
Yes.
And do you have any difficulties with international law or the local law in terms of barrier that you have to
I think, we invest, I think, in 14 or 16 different countries.
Right.
And kind of one of the first things we do everywhere we go is get very competent local counsel. And we don't go anywhere without a local partner.
So they are first.
So the combination of local counsel and local partner before we do anything else. Yes?
We were talking about the need to fix the deficit problems in the United States, and if confidence in the dollar fell, then our interest would go up, and we'd have all kinds of problems. I remember back in the first or second Republican presidential candidate debates, one of the moderators asked a question, if you could have a plan to fix this deficit, 10 part spending reduction, 1 part tax increase, would you vote for it? not a single candidate up there would raise their hand, not even John Huntsman, who was supposed to be more compromising or whatever. And we got this Grover Norquist guy goes around and says, sign my pledge, don't raise taxes ever. Do you see that as a problem for the Republican Party in achieving this goal of like financial responsibility? And I'm a registered Republican, so I'm not
Yeah,
sure.
I guess what I would say to you is that, that 1 in 10 question is a trap. It was a deliberate trap. I mean, the answer is everybody says, we're not in favor of raising taxes. So then you say, well, would you? Okay, I mean, the answer is everybody knew what everybody's going to respond to, but I don't think it's particularly relevant either way. There's got to be some kind of a grand compromise. And will that grand compromise include raising taxes? Sure. Is it going to be raising taxes by raising brackets, or is it going to be raising taxes by eliminating, holes in the tax code? Is it going to be raising taxes by a VAT tax versus something else? Yes.
So earlier you talked about Sarbanes-Oxley and Dodd-Frank as far as regulations adding difficulties on business. And then before that you talked about how during the mortgage crisis, there was a lot of Wall Street companies, pretty much you said, were crooks. So where do you see the balance in regulation as far as in the financial sector?
You ever heard of Bernie Madoff? The SEC had a 40-page dossier on him in 1999, and nobody picked up a finger. There were mortgage regulators, believe it or not, that were, I don't know what they were doing, okay? I mean, there were women, literally beautiful women, hired in California who literally traded favors for mortgages. I mean, the answer is, if the government had been, I'm going to talk slower again? I mean, what's the matter? Read my lips, all right? In any event, all I'm saying to you is that in effect, the rules were there. They weren't enforced. Then they passed Sarbanes-Oxley, and guess what? It didn't stop the fraud. And the next corporate fraud is not going to get stopped by Dodd-Frank. You can't legislate morality. What you can do is create a regulatory environment that has limited rules that are enforced. That's basically all I'm saying. Yes?
So here at the law school, we have something called the corporate lab, where we get to work with actual clients in sort of real life situations. I was wondering if you could speak to sort of whether or not you thought that a real estate offering of this type would be valuable for students. I know that you said, a lot of your perspective changes once you're from behind the desk of academia. And I was wondering if you could talk about sort of how you could gain valuable skills that would help you after graduation.
Well, I think that probably the first thing you need to do is understand how little you know. And I know that sounds like a funny first statement on my part, but it's really true. I mean, we all, particularly at a university like this one or Michigan, I didn't know anything about the rules of Illinois law before I studied for the bar, but I learned how to think. And that's the same thing that's happening to you. And the first thing you got to do after you get out of here is add substance to your, in other words, you got this part, now you got to get this part. And people ask me all the time, I say, go work for a bank for 2 years, go work for a REIT, but get into the core of what the business is, and then figure out what tomorrow is. Yes.
Another hot button issue, since we got you on a roll, is immigration reform is this huge hot button issue, which smacks a little bit of kind of fear mongering and social political rattling, saber rattling. But at your level, how much do you think that actually has an impact on how businesses can grow and
You know what America is? We're a country of immigrants. And you know what immigrants are? They're a self-selecting group. In other words, I was born 90 days after my parents came to this country. My mother and father and older sister came here. There were 6 brothers and 6 sisters of my parents who all died in the Holocaust because none of them, my parents pleaded with them, to come with, and they wouldn't come. Things are okay, the last time wasn't so bad. And so it's that selective process multiplied millions of times, which is what America is all about. And for us not to be the country of immigration is nuts. I think that's crazy. At the same time, you can't have a massive illegal system, and you need a system for people to make progress. And we need to make sure, first and foremost, that every single person from a foreign country that we train in our universities gets a green card. Every single one. It's so stupid, it doesn't make sense. And it's become a political issue. I don't get it. I just don't get it. So I think for sure fixing the immigration system. And I think, we have this, we were talking before about fair. The bottom line is we should be encouraging the immigration of people who we think are going to benefit us. Okay? So if I have a choice between, providing immigration for a 60-year-old grandmother and versus a 25-year-old computer scientist, I want to take the computer scientist because it's really about the future of our country. And what these people can do, just like my parents, just like everybody here at one point or another was an immigrant. So that's where I'm coming from.
Got one more question.
This lady here.
You were discussing the issue of the debt in the United States, and one way to solve it is obviously to decrease the debt, but the other way would be also to increase growth. And so I was wondering.
Increase what?
Growth, economic
right.
growth. So I was wondering.
And additional regulation is very good for increasing growth. And Sarbanes-Oxley is very good for increasing growth. And Dodd-Frank and Obamacare are wonderful for increasing growth.
And the question is?
What are your recommendations for improving growth, and what are your predictions?
I just, I guess my concerns are the government is way too involved in the economy. It's way too involved in too many things. Ben Franklin and the founders of our country, created a republic of enumerated powers, and those have been eroded, and I think those impair growth.
All right, so now before we end, I have a present for you. This is something you are supposed to wear. I mean, it won't, he is well known for not dressing up. This will not change things, but this is for you.
Thank you.
And
oh, it's a hoodie.
There.
Thank you.
You are welcome.
Thank you.